Hello, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Well, thank you for coming back to my channel. Um, I saw the comment recently by Sir Lenny Henry saying that the United Kingdom ought to pay reparations to all black Britishers. Now, everybody knows that there was the transatlantic slave trade, and the United Kingdom and its predecessor state, England and Wales, was one of the worst perpetrators, purchasing people who had been enslaved by fellow Africans, occasionally abducting them directly. And these people were treated with the most barbarous cruelty, branded, families broken up, some of them summarily murdered. He thought they might not survive the voyage, chained up, have no idea where they're going, taken across the Atlantic Ocean, the most inhumane conditions. I try and put myself in the position of one of those people in the hold of that ship and just how hellish it would have been. And then taken to the Caribbean or North America and forced into servitude, whipped, working under the broiling sun. So it was the most satanic cruelty, no question about it. Now, that was abolished in the 1830s. Obviously, the transatlantic trade in people was abolished in 1807. So there's no question that the UK was a terrible offender on this one, and there were acts of parliament about it. So the government was indirectly involved. And some people, some very wealthy people today, their fortunes can be partly traced back to that blood money. Some institutions, such as the Church of England, which is paying a scythement, and indeed the royal family. King James II was president of the Royal African Company, and its stock in trade was our own species. So there's no question that there was enormous evil perpetrated that time ago. That's abolished almost 200 years ago. I know compensation was paid, shockingly, not to the victims, to the perpetrators. When people had their right to freedom recognized and were emancipated, the compensation was paid to the slave owners, not to the victims of servitude. And the biggest single recipient was the Gladstone family. Yeah, that's Prime Minister William Ewart Gladstone's father, Sir John Gladstone. And that's why only even the Bahamas, for instance, have got the surname Gladstone. But there's no reason why almost 200 years later, British taxpayers should be shelling out for this. Because obviously many Britons came to the United Kingdom well after the abolition of slavery. What if you had one ancestor who was living in the UK before that and others who weren't? I mean, can you even trace it back? That's injustice, because guilt is personal, not national. You shouldn't be punishing the whole country. You might say, what about the Third Reich? Well, this is breach of Godwin's law. Anyway, reductio ad Hitlerum. Well, when Germany was paying this, actually, it's only West Germany paid it. East Germany never paid any reparations on the basis that they were not a successor state of Das Dritten Reich, which is nonsense. Anyway, that was within living memory. They were the victims themselves, not their great-great-great-great-grandchildren. And often it was the perpetrators who were still alive who were paying it. And so on. Another thing is the UK was an undemocratic country back then, so we don't know that the public was in favour of this. Wow. So this shouldn't be paid. But what Sir Lenny Henry has suggested is even dafter. Now, I appreciated Sir Lenny's comedy when he was doing it in the old days, as far back as the early 90s. But he says that all black British citizens should get compensation. So therefore, it's unconnected with slavery. Some of them are not descendants of slaves at all. Kemi Badenoch, whose family only came to the UK in the 1970s, and people whose ancestors might have been slave traders and slave raiders and so forth. Why on earth should they get compensation? And he says it's to reduce racialism. It will aggravate it. It's to pit one race against the other, so that white Britons and other non-white Britons, like British Indians, British Chinese people, will have to pay for this. And one race will be the recipients. That is preposterous. Talk about being divisive. There are white Britons who are relatively recent Britishers, like Polish British people, Romanian British people, or whatever, Lithuanian British people, and they had no connection with the transatlantic slave trade, their ancestors even remotely. So this really is ridiculous to divide us into these racial categories. And then how about people who are intermediate, or half black and half white, or 3/4 white and 1/4 black? I mean, do they get less money or what? Would the right hand have to pay money to the left hand? This is ridiculous. So no, it shouldn't be paid. And okay, and obviously when these people were kidnapped, money was paid to the various African kings and chieftains who'd defeated a neighboring nation, should I say tribe, and enslaved those people. So money was going to Africa in that sense. Obviously, there was a loss of human capital, people who could develop Africa, who were brought to the Caribbean And there's no question they were treated abominably. Although, ironically, the Caribbean countries are mostly much better off than West Africa, where these people's ancestors came from several generations before, which is not to say there was a remotely benevolent motive for the transatlantic slave trade. There definitely wasn't. It was the frankest exploitation. Wow, goodness. So the only reason that slavery was abolished in Africa is because of the British Empire. There was no emancipatory movement there beforehand. And there were these enormous slave-based empires in West Africa for many centuries before Western Europeans began settling there. So obviously the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, France, Spain, Portugal, to some extent Sweden, even Denmark. So all the Euro-Atlantic countries were engaged in this. And we in Ireland, we were engaged in it too. Obviously, we're part of the United Kingdom from 1801. Even prior to the Act of Union in Ireland, we were engaged in it to a lesser extent. So goodness, it shouldn't be done. And obviously slavery has existed throughout human history. We've had recorded history for 5,000 years, has existed in almost every country in almost every era down to the 19th century. And this is the first principled abolition of slavery. I know the Emperor Ashoka in India millennia ago, he declared the abolishment of servitude, although it's brought back quite quickly. Goodness. And then even after the British Empire abolished slavery, the Royal Navy was sending out these patrols to try and stop the slave trade to other places and interfere with the sovereign rights of other countries, but it was a human rights imperative and surely a very good thing. But why is it only the UK or Western European countries that have to pay it, or the USA? Why is it not Turkey as the successor state of the Ottoman Empire, or Russia as a successor state of the Soviet Union, for the enslavement of people on the basis of their ethnicity, like being Tatar or Chechen or something, or China holding slavery today? Uyghurs are enslaved right now. It's going on right now. Surely that should be the priority, not people who suffered a very, very long time ago. If I can prove my ancestors being slaves so many generations ago, should I be compensated? Of course not. I don't think it would have been 10 generations ago or 20 generations ago, or maybe, Ireland, obviously, the English abolished it for us, thank you very much, in the 12th century. So, but if I had an ancestor who was a slave before then, should I be compensated? Of course not. But if I were to be given reparation, by whom? I haven't suffered for it. It's just ridiculous. This victim mentality trying to exploit people so many centuries later. So Lenny Henry's comment is really asinine, and what a huge waste of public funds. Goodness, looking at India, which has got more slaves than any other country in the world. Now, I know slavery is illegal in India, and most Indians would be as horrified by slavery as I am, but unfortunately it still goes on, and obviously India's not been able to put its own house in order. There's talk about reparations for imperialism. That's another story, even though imperialism is something that India agreed to and actively participated from and benefited from enormously. And there were some disbenefits as well. Well, thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate, PayPal, georgecalan7@gmail.com. Goodbye.